Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our July meeting for Ways and Means. If we're all ready, let's stand and recite the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Do we have any changes or amendments to the agenda?
There was one change, and that was the budget, to add the actual budget
Okay,
to the
thank
agenda.
you.
Also to remove IT.
Oh, to remove the IT report. Thank
Yeah.
you, Melissa.
We struck out the item 6 is gone. Anything else?
That'll do it.
All right, do we have a motion to approve? Moved and supported. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Okay, onward to item 4, approval of minutes for the June 13th meeting.
Hold on. I have your closed session minutes as well. I apologize.
Okay. Yeah, please stand by, exactly. Okay, any discussion? Oh, did we get a motion? I'm sorry, do we have a motion? Motion to accept? Do we have a second? We have support. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? That is passed. We are now to our first limited public comment. Do we have any public comment this morning? All right, seeing none, we're skipping item 6 and moving to item number 7, Communications Director Department Report.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning, Logan.
Logan Bailey, Communications Director. I'm going to jump around a little bit here, but to start, you'll see an aggregate of 6 months of data from the site in your packet. That's 225,000 total users have accessed our site this first half of the year. 63% were actually new users, which isn't too surprising given that we had the election in May, so that was new folks accessing our site for the first time, at least this year. 37% were returning, but also 20,000 of those were bots, which underscores the need for security awareness as well. A couple of the insights I wanted to go over here, those infamous rage clicks where folks can't get it to work and they're clicking all around our site, those have dropped significantly, which I'm happy to report. But there was also quickbacks have occurred 17% of all sessions, which is significant, and that means they can't find what they're looking for, and so they're going back and forth trying to find it, so there's a lot of work we need to do there. We are a content-heavy site as a government site. But those 20,000 sessions from bots can be considered, suspicious interactions. 10,000 of those, so half of them, we know originated from suspicious origins, likely, and that just means they could be scraping for data, looking for anywhere within our site where it's maybe easy for them to get in on the back end there. And that also stems from those JavaScript errors that we've talked about. And so that's when our site, maybe an interactive thing or a form doesn't work. And so, there's an error, whether that's because of servers, whether that's because of the code itself. So I've reached out to Civic Plus to kind of talk about why are we having still such a high variable loss there. And so stay tuned for that, but nothing too concerning. This could just be AI scraping when somebody searches something online, scraping our site, maybe getting a little confusing, but that is what it is. We also show another insight here is that mobile use has gone up as an aggregate of who's accessing our site and how, which isn't too much of a surprise, but that also shows that we really need to focus on getting mobile usability far higher. That should be the highest priority, I'd say, for my office at this point when it comes to the site. Lastly here, later this month, I get to present, last thing on the website, I get to present what my office does, what my position does. I look forward to doing that in the next couple weeks here. But I did want to say, I'm not ignorant to the fact that there is a lot of conversation online about us monitoring this website, specifically my position monitoring this website. And I just want to be clear here. My position is more than a website babysitter, but at the same time, whether or not I'm here long-term or not, do not stop monitoring this. You can't. This is all about accessibility. It's all about transparency. And as soon as we stop caring about this accessibility on this site and stop cleaning it and making it better, that's folks not being able to access their services, whether they need to utilize the justice system on here, find information from the controller's office or the treasurer's office, the prosecuting attorney, or if they need to pay a bill. You know, we want them to be able to access these services. And so we can't be ignorant of that. That's something the county hasn't really prioritized in the past. So I want to make sure that we continue to do that. Any questions on the site at all?
Commissioner.
My question is maybe a little bit, is there any other way that we can evaluate the impact of the communications success or impact other than these analyticals from?
For specifically the website, you mean? Like,
No, or like other things that you do to inform and to, connect us with the community.
I mean,
I mean, we have
that
a
would be-
newsletter, I know, but.
that may be a question. I guess when you look at my job, and I am doing things a little beyond my job description, which is fine, and I signed up for this, I knew what I was signing up for. So I would say if you look at these web analytics, you look at the reach we have on social, the newsletter sure is another platform, but I'm also trying to secure funding, so you can look at that. You can look at the traditional media coverage that we now see. And as, public relations may seem frivolous, but at the same time, that's how we're getting this information in the door to these folks. And that's something that they haven't really seen from the county before. So
Well,
I
I
would
don't think
say,
it's frivolous.
yeah,
I
thank
think
you.
it's really important, and it's hard to measure.
Yeah, it is hard to measure. I'll work on finding maybe more succinct ways to do that, and I look forward
Don't
to
do any more work just for that, but
No, yeah.
no, you already have 3 jobs. You don't have to have 4.
Any other questions on the site?
Commissioner Barber.
Yes, you brought up the suspicious, bots, AI. Did you talk to the website host about how to start identifying what is AI scrubs and
Yes.
versus?
I haven't heard back. I haven't heard back yet. But I imagine I know what they're going to say is that what they can help me do is identify errors in the code when it comes in terms of JavaScript, and we don't have a code writer here. I have very minimal experience doing that or monitoring or editing that in any way. Civic Plus can handle that. And so I bet they're going to tell me that it's next to impossible to determine just what suspicious is. And this suspicious flag here is just at the fact that there are more and more AI platforms scraping the site, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But when there are errors in the script or there's errors in the code, then that maybe could make it a little more vulnerable. One thing to note with Civic Plus is that it is a government host site. And so they deal with sites that are hugely robust. There's a lot of data. There's a lot of historic archiving that happens. A lot of people filling out forms, making payments. And so their security is good. But my question is, when I look at this 6 months compared to last year, it is up. And I don't know if that's AI going up, so I'm hoping they can define for me, why is this up? How concerned do we need to be? And what can we do to fix any of these problems? So that's kind of an answer, kind of a non-answer, but yeah.
Any other questions? Commissioner Haskell.
So when you say AI scraping, I've noticed that just about every search engine now, when you search something without getting to actually clicking on a website, it gives you a rough answer of what your question is. Is that what the AI is doing? Is it's looking into our website, pulling some data out and putting it into the,
Yeah,
and that's being flagged as,
it could be, that's my guess as to what's part of what
Yeah.
part of this actually is. The other side is too, we could have a malicious person trying to write their own AI to go in and scrape data that we don't want them to have or try to find it. So that could be the other side of it. Now, do I think 20,000 bot sessions are 20,000 individual folks trying to do that? I doubt it,
right,
but I don't know. Yeah.
right, okay, thanks.
Any other questions? All right, anything else, Logan?
Yes, I'm going to jump to just policy discussion here. I know that we in the Controller's Office have been, we've been talking about new policies, and we've presented some, you've passed some as well. I have a few on my docket that I did want to flag up to you. You don't have drafts within your packet today, but you will in the next month or so start seeing these for your review. I'm not sure if that'll be under my part of this, or I know that there's a general policy section as well, but one is coincidentally an AI use policy for the county. This is to try and integrate this emerging tech into a lot of our workflows. We know it's likely already happening in some departments utilizing it, and it's an emerging technology. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But we want to protect the county mainly from data handling. We do not want to have staff putting in personal data or trying to do decision-making using any AI platform, whether that's OpenAI, ChatGPT, whatever it might be. We want to set some guardrails for the responsible use of it, permitted use, prohibited use, data protection, and then human review standards. Now, I don't think any department is doing this in a bad way by any means at this point, but we should have some guardrails set up at the very least to have an understanding of what's happening and how we can monitor it to the best of our ability, which is going to be difficult. The other couple of policies, traditional media policy and social media policies, Chair DeRocha, Commissioner Whitaker, we have talked about traditional media procedures, traditional media policies in the past or the last couple of months here. And this is really just to ensure consistency, compliance, transparency. Social media-wise specifically, this will help with FOIA and archiving record retention. Content guidelines when any given department or someone is representing the county. We have a lot of great departments that have a lot of reach on social media, which is fantastic. That's how we're getting information to the residents. But when you're representing the county, we kind of want to make sure we have a commenting or moderation policy. And I work closely with pretty much every department that utilizes social media. We have a great relationship going back and forth, but this will kind of set those guardrails again, just so we have it. And as well, during emergencies, I serve as the public information officer. I work closely with Ryan Wilkinson. And so having crisis communications, rules and procedures in place, let's say I'm gone, I'm on vacation, whatever it might be, Ryan isn't available, we have those guidelines in place, especially for these departments that have a lot of reach. And then with traditional media, it's just because we need to have designated spokespersons, a process for requests, which we kind of already have. The media didn't really talk to the county much. Now that they are, I get a lot of calls from departments if somebody is trying to reach out. Usually they do go through me. Sometimes they're trying to bypass me as best as they can. So having those process for requests in place, and then also media training, what that looks like, how can I facilitate that for some spokespeople that want to do that kind of work. And then the last piece is an advertising policy, which is really just to manage promotion, public messaging as equitably as we can, that would govern what can be displayed or promoted on behalf of the county, just to make sure we're not throwing money on something that we don't want to throw money behind that's representing Eaton County specifically. And those are kind of the four policies that you're going to start needing to review from my office specifically.
Thank you. Questions? I've got a question.
Yeah.
I know I'm an old guy. What is the advantage to this AI stuff, this ChatGPT, for the county? Why would we even need it? We never needed it before.
I would say in terms of workflow, we do have offices that are short-staffed, say. And so being able to, you can utilize AI for more than just, and as Commissioner Haskell said, they're using it in search engines, they're using it, you can kind of, I know a lot of folks that use ChatGPT, for instance, as their search engine at this point. I have used it looking up an MCL, trying to find, where can I find this? The dog law, for instance. I was trying to find it quickly during our budget meeting to try and figure out what that was. And so I typed it in, and it linked me straight to the MCL. So you can use it as a search engine. You can use it for research. You can use it for drafting as well. There are some flags and that are fairly obvious if you are trained to kind of find that you'll know if it was built out from AI. And we have to have, if that's going to be the case where departments or employees are utilizing it, we have to have a means of human review to get an understanding of, because you cannot trust that it's going to have complete accuracy. You cannot trust that it's not going to misunderstand what cues you're sending it. I have limited knowledge on many of these AI platforms, but I know that they can be very useful in terms of research and workflow, especially if you don't have time in the day. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, I'm not familiar with it, so it does a bit. I'm just wondering if it's, well, I guess we can deal with that when we come to the policy, but. All right,
Can I add just an HR perspective? So, like some organizations like tried to embrace it really quickly with like hiring, for instance. But you have to be very careful with that because systems can discriminate because it's not a human element, right? So it's just gonna try to base everything on logical progression or something. So inadvertently, a lot of private companies have had to, one, develop their own internal so it's secure. So there are a couple different AI platforms. One is hosted through China, right? So probably a good place to start is we shouldn't put any of the Eaton County information into a platform that's hosted by a foreign power, right? Step one, and then step two would be you can't put in personal information, right? So like if you're like, oh, compare these candidates for me, it would be a completely inappropriate use of that because you're putting personal identifiable information into a system that you have no control over. So those are some, if it's helpful, as people think about how they can apply it from an HR standpoint, it is pretty serious. And the more sensitive information an employee works with, probably the less access they're gonna have to it. But if you need a general idea, like, hey, I wanna write a letter thanking somebody, you can get a draft and then go ahead and personalize it and clean text copy it. So that'll be kind of the stuff we try to build out from that.
Try to mitigate that as much as possible.
Yeah.
And there are softwares too that can actually identify this was probably written by AI. There's a lot of safeguards we can implement.
Share one thing. We had somebody apply and the cover letter was really well written. And at the end it said, I know I would make a great addition to parentheses, insert company name here. And I'm reading, and this is why it's good to have a human read it, because I read it and I'm like, oh, that's a red flag, so. It may have been for a position that requires attention to detail, yeah.
so Ben, you're saying you don't use this for recruitment purposes?
I updated my cover letter right away, and I'm kidding.
All right, Logan, anything else?
Yeah, real quick, I just want to talk very briefly about some of the active funding requests we have in the $2.5 million for the animal control building with the state, thanks to Representative Whitwer. $10 million for Bank Intercounty Drain for resident funding specifically, thanks to Representative Whitwer, and then $4 million, which is not listed in the packet, for Horner Mill demolition and redevelopment. Eaton Rapids is kind of taking point on that. And then $413,000 for security enhancements for this complex. That one has been sponsored by Congressman Barrett, Senator Slotkin, and Senator Peters, who I have had many conversations with. And we're cautiously optimistic now that the reconciliation bill has passed. They're expecting in the next couple of months that this will start, the allocation requests will really start being debated in earnest. But they have been, they're really open to communication with me, which has been really nice. And then I do want to give a shout out to Commissioner Christensen for connecting me to another person in Congressman Barrett's office. I've been working with her beginning this week. And they have a little team of research folks, I guess, that they're helping us identify where we haven't already potential funding options for the animal control building itself. Because even though we do have a request in with the state, I am not particularly optimistic that we're going to get that funding. So yeah, any questions on some of those funding requests that we have? That concludes my report.
All right, thank you, Logan. On to item number 8. Deputy Administrator, Human Resources Director Ben.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I have a lot to go through, but it's not as scary as it looks. But in today's packet, about 120 pages of it is me. I promise not to talk that long. So this is our annual valuations. We've got both for MERS, our pension evaluation, and our retirees' health. So these are important, real touch points where we just see where we're at from a funding standpoint and then get an idea what costs could look like in the future. And then there's an opportunity to add additional time to some of our MERS pension groups, which has the possibility of saving money that I'll go through. But before I dive into those, I just wanted to explain why I'm so much of the packet this week. So for positions, as you can see, we have a lot of positions on hold and a lot of openings. So our vacancy ratio as of today of this report is 16.15% of budgeted positions in the county are currently open. The 12-month average is now 13%. And I just got an email this morning. I don't have, resignations, but there's going to be more deputy attrition coming up because hiring processes can take a while with other agencies and organizations. And so there's a bit of a tail, even though we've stabilized that we've got a financial framework with Delta. While that's still resolving, a lot of folks are still in the process of evaluating other opportunities. And that's playing out in other areas of the county as well. As you can see, there's a lot of openings there. We do not have any recommendations for positions in the administrative wing, so there's no action required, but I welcome questions if anybody has them on the positions update before we move on.
No questions.
Okay. So next, this is a little different than we did in prior years, but I tried to do a summary snapshot of the pension performance. Chair Drosha, this includes the administrative expenses going back the last 9 years. So it was a question that we had in the prior year, and we didn't have that information readily available. But since we last did this, we've started trying to compile that so we can keep that record as we go forward. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, Delta Township update. Item B, all right. So the update is we've had some really promising and positive discussions with the township. We had a meeting earlier this week with MERS where they came in to talk about how the agreement could positively impact our pension plan. So that was a joint meeting, and then afterwards we were able to talk through the contract administrative staff between Delta and the county. We have had a couple revisions back and forth of contract language. I'm happy to report it's not radically different than the original contract we had in place. It's got just enough to make it work, but it's not over encumbered by a bunch of language that makes it a really complicated agreement, which has been the history of that contract over the last 40 years. So in that same spirit of cooperation, we will ask today if you can authorize, even though we don't have it available today, we think we will have it ready by the full board. So just authorizing the Board of Commissioners to evaluate and move forward if the terms of the agreement presented to you next week are acceptable to you all.
Okay, so that's an action item.
That is an action item.
We have a motion to approve. Okay, moved and supported. Any discussion? What kind of changes do you think might come about between now and the board meeting?
Well, we settled initially when we get to item D, that evaluation for the impact of what the Delta contract would have was based on a 2.2 million one-time injection, county and Delta at this time is looking at a 2 million, and then we would still do $1 million. So it would be higher than this projection shows being injected into it. There are some parameters for, I don't want to say protection, but just, this contract reflects the county's position that there is no funding for services, for sheriff's deputies, for road patrol. And the cost is built into that. If the county has the ability to sustain or expand operations, then there are mechanisms in there that this contract is revisited at that time, even if it's in the period of the 10 years, which we think is a pretty reasonable thing to have included for them and for us, because ultimately this contract reflects if it needed to stand alone because there's nothing else. And yeah, I would say that's probably a big piece, but we'll have more Wednesday, and we'll try to, hopefully if we have it ready, enough time that you all can review it in advance as part of the packet. Yeah.
So it will go to just our board first. Never mind.
Oh, yeah, it will go to our board first and then to Delta's board, I think the following Monday.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a question. I'll get to yours. That was posed to me at the fair just a couple days ago. What if financially Delta Township fails, can't afford to do this? What's in our contract to protect the county?
Well, for one, I think they have different revenue-raising abilities, so I believe that they can levy a special revenue without taking it to the ballot. But arguably, even if they had to take it to the ballot, Delta has been supportive of both the November and the May ballot. So in that sense, you know, all politics are local. I think the discussion there is different than it was in other segments of the county that have varying needs of service requirements, right? But if there was an instance, we have provisions in there that deal with the one-time allocation of money to MERS, whether it's reimbursable or not, depending on who's closing the contract. There's a 3-year out provision built into it, so no matter what, even if things start to, it's a 3-year out. There's a mechanism built in there that if, for financial reasons, like the number of deputies can be adjusted by Delta if they need it, either up or down, depending on their budgetary ability. But that's once a year that that opens up.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, thank you.
yeah.
All right. Commissioner Haskell.
This might not be a question that can be answered here, and maybe Sheriff Reich can, maybe is the more appropriate person to answer, but last month, we heard that there was like 4 deputies that might be able to be retained for Out County. And I know we've had to do a lot of restructuring for this Delta contract with command units and whatever else being based locally. Were we able to retain those 4 based on that general restructuring that we had to do, or?
Well, I can answer from a position standpoint, and sorry, I didn't cover that. Even though these are listed on hold, we did actually post the sponsorship academy and hiring for deputies because we're at that threshold of being able to support even a base presence in the county. And I'm not talking Out County Patrol, I'm talking courthouse security, training officer, administrative captain, and then the deputies at the Delta contract. So we did open up recruitment because it does take about a year to get somebody through the academy, through field training, back up. Depending how many resignations we have, and Sheriff could disagree with me, I don't know where we're at with that. But when I look at the numbers, I don't see even the staffing capability, even if you were able to find the money. But that's just my personal perspective. I welcome.
I hope I'm not, you know, starting a debate that doesn't need to be had, but my thought is as we move forward with this Delta vote, if there is that potential, I want everyone to understand in the board that, like, if that doesn't go forward, maybe something else doesn't go forward as well. Does that make sense?
What I brought up was there are 4 vacancies for the road patrol in the Out County and 2 sergeants. We have the 2 sergeant bodies, we don't have the 4 deputies. However, I gave you what you asked for, the 1.9 plus some, and these was leftovers. Sure, it's gonna take 12 months. Right now, it's vacant. This is gonna be for the future when we get people through the academy and get trained. That's my only request, is to keep these open positions so we can hire somebody, send them to the academy, and get trained properly. That's where we're at.
And with that request, would you still be able to do that, say, if the Delta contract didn't go through?
That would all depend on
Sure.
you folks.
Understood.
So I'm going to mention, because of what you just said, one of the things that Delta Township put in the contract, there were some outs, like Ben had talked about, where they could renegotiate. So if Out County Road Patrol is done, or there is a contract with another municipality that is better than the contract that Delta has, that Delta can come back and renegotiate. Meaning the administrative fee that we have and them paying the full cost and having the command staff present there, they could come back and the county would end up with additional costs under the contract. So, and that's Delta's position on that, is that they're having to have the residents pay for it. So if you come back, they're going to say that the residents shouldn't have to pay this much because you now have the Out County to back us up. Whereas right now, as the contract's built, there is no backup. If they have vacancies over there, or 5 people leave, we have to try to fill them, but they don't have backup that can come in and work overtime. So that's something that you'll have to discuss. And I will tell you, I mean, I don't have a problem saying this, that will break down negotiations with Delta. So if that happens during the budget process, they're not going to want to approve that part of the contract.
Commissioner Christensen.
While we're hitting, excuse me, while we're hitting on the Delta subject, what are the other charter townships looking at? Have we had any negotiations with them? Are they reaching out?
So yes, we've had, Windsor Township and Oneida Township have reached out. We had to wait for the framework for this contract to be done. Otherwise, the framework would have to be the same for Delta as we were doing for the other townships, meaning Delta would say, we're not going to negotiate the same thing we've been talking about. So that's where we're at. As soon as that's approved next week, Wednesday, then we can have the discussions
Okay,
with those townships and give them a calculation and so on.
perfect, thank you.
Any other questions concerning this, Commissioner Wright?
Okay, so when you talked about changes, though, we're still looking, going forward next Wednesday with 40 positions versus the 35 that has been in Delta, right? So there's no changes there.
Correct. Now, the financial framework is unchanged. It's really just the contractual language that we've been working on.
Okay, thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? All right, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Okay, that's approved. Ben, run with that. And now back to Delta, or back to the insurance stuff.
I got you. We're on the same page. All right, so we did a snapshot summary of pension performance, which includes the administrative expenses funding ratio going back 10 years, as well as we created a table just showing the progression of our pension since 1983. It's not meant to be bleak, but it's just information. So, anyway, so the expenses are at 0.2% of our assets, which is a pretty decent ratio. Like, it's pretty common for administrative fees for managing asset classes and stuff.
So we're paying MERS that amount.
Correct, to administer our exactly, yep. And then I'll start going through the actual report itself. So we've received our 2024 actuarial valuation for our pension from Municipal Employees Retirement System, MERS of Michigan. In your packet, you see the 60-page document available for your review. This is going to be a short summary and highlight some applicable sections. So important to note, the required contributions contained in this report are not what we're using in the current budget you're discussing. Sometimes it's like, whoa, what? They are a year in arrears. So the 2024 is going to be used for budget 26-27, and you're using 2023's valuation is what is being used in the budget that we're looking at today. I will also add the caveat too that once we get to the next item and we start doing financial injections into MERS, you're going to see that this calculation will begin to change over time. So some of those changes will be realized in advance of 2025 or fiscal year 26-27, in that those rates will have to be updated if we adopt the other item. But still, for quite a few of you, this is your first time through. So this is how we evaluate where we're at with our pension fund in a normal year. So our rating decreased from 61% last year to 60%. This is the same pattern we see when we have what's essentially a drag on our 5-year smoothing process. So smoothing is a process in which if there's a bad financing year, MERS by actuarial rules and the state of Michigan is allowed to take that loss and spread it out over multiple years. So you just don't have dramatic spikes in pension required contributions. That's the idea. But what that also does is when you have a bad year, it kind of lingers with the tail for 5 years. So as you look at it, our market rate of return for this year was 7.28%, but the smoothed valuation was 3.79. And that's because in 2022, we had a loss of about 11% in that fiscal year, and then it rebounded 11% in the next year. So it will just take time as that begins rolling off. Additionally, we made additional contributions of about $84,000, which you can see on page 23. This is a practice that Controller Sobeys implemented where if we have a position that's budgeted, we still contribute the MERS portion as part of our getting fully funded process. The main factors that can drive changes within these valuations are the returns and market performance I just described, changes in benefit provisions that can occur whether through bargaining or rule rewrites, changes in actuarial assumptions and methods, which MERS met to adopt their next round of those, and they did not have any significant changes. So no changes on like gender, life expectancy, and different things like that can impact your evaluation. Yep, covered that.
Question.
Yeah.
What is our projected, from our standpoint, surplus that MERS has?
Like MERS is an organization?
No,
Oh.
yeah, MERS as an organization, projected surplus of our funds that we've sent them. We've talked about this in the past, but I haven't heard it. It doesn't have to be definite, but
There's a page that, in the report, let's
Do you mean
see,
the amount that is,
required.
well, no, do you mean the value of assets that are?
I,
in the fund?
over and above, and we've talked about this at prior meetings, what they have in excess of what is actually needed from our perspective.
Well, I personally haven't done a model, and I'm thinking I'm not understanding the question. So, because what they do is the evaluation of how long they think everyone who's qualifies is gonna live for, and I have not run one of those. What I have done in the past is I say, okay, we have 120 million in assets. They say we have 199 million in liability. The net difference is 78 million, and that's what's called our unfunded accrued liability. And that's what bases the funded ratio at 60% this year. What and what we have done as we've had discussions with communities is like, as a marker for ability to pay, it should really take into consideration how much revenue the county gets. And last year, our required contributions to get fully funded by 2040, which is a requirement that exists, our required contributions alone, which are mandatory contributions, made up 32.5% of our general fund revenue. So obviously, as that gets bigger, there's less money to support services, give employees raises, and to staff departments. So the item D, when we get to it, is an opportunity to add additional years, 5 years to the tail end of a lot of our pension groups. And so when we get there, it will show the positive impact that can have, which is something we had been having conversations with communities about, that should be an opportunity available if a county or a city or village negotiates and like reduces benefits and takes positive action for trying to manage their pension expenses. There should be the ability to help refinance or redo the terms of your.
That was my question concerning a statement that you said, when they have a bad year and we pay that over a period of time. If they have excess funds, how can we have a bad year? Wouldn't they just take that funding and move it into that deficit, and then we wouldn't have to change our payments?
Yeah, yeah. And that is a difficult thing to like quantify, because I've tried to do their asset smoothing, and I'm obviously not using the same system that they have, but conceivably it'd be, every year divided by 5, and then, when you go to calculate, you add up the prior portion from the 5 years prior plus what the actual was to get to the rate of return. So there are some years when you look at it, like this year where we had a 7.28 and our smooth rate is, 3.79, right? And it's kind of like, well, where's the variance on that? It's spoken for to make up for the shortfall from 2022. So I guess if you wanted, you could explore going to the smoothing or off the smoothing if that was even an option. But if we did that, we would be subject to those swings of the market. So 2022 is an example, we would have had about a 11% swing on our MERS pension for that year. So that would have been a really bad year, but then it would have bounced back and been 11% in the positive the next year. And you'd be like, oh, well, yeah, yeah.
Well, it's never going to work to our advantage, is it?
I would say once you get above 80 to 85% funded, it's a lot more comfortable for communities.
Yeah.
When you're at 60 to 70, it's rough. And if you're below 60, it's even worse. And a lot of those communities, their only hope is that the state appropriates money, which they attempted to do, but for a lot of those communities, that wasn't even enough to get them over the mile marker. And everybody above 60, like us, was excluded, which really sucks when you do the work of bargaining to reduce a benefit, which is not favorable from the employees, but you have to do it. Like we did the hard work, we just didn't get any benefits from the state.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Back to what you were saying.
Jeannie's got a
Oh,
question.
question, Jeannie.
Okay, so then you just talked earlier about the Delta contract and how we'll add more. That's going to get us above that 60% eventually because of the way the Delta contract is written, as long as Delta stays with the contract. Because anything over 5% also would go towards that pension, to raise it up. Is that still,
Yeah, so.
we should be at some point better.
And we're kind of blurring the two items, but neither of these are action, well, the other one is an action item. But yes, to your point, if we make a $3 million injection today, it will immediately adjust that. And then the injection that we're making will be to specific groups within the sheriff's office that will be supporting services under the contract. So yeah, it will not only have a percentage change for the funded ratio, but that will equate to a reduced required contribution going forward in future years as well, which translates into, going from 140% that has to be paid for every dollar that you pay to a command officer, that rate will come down because of the money being put in advance. The one thing is, obviously we do this year by year, so, if there's a 20% loss in the market next year, it's going to suck. But it would have sucked whether or not we put $3 million in there anyway. But that's the one caveat. So $1 saved today, it can still fluctuate.
Come out in the smoothing.
Correct.
I mean,
Yeah.
everything should help move us up the,
Yeah. And the Delta contract includes one-time contribution and then 5% of the administrative service fee that the county collects is also going to be put into those pension groups. Over the term of the 10-year contract, that'll be a significant amount of money committed to getting those pension fund liabilities taken care of, which I think is one of the reasons this body was able to unanimously support that contract. And we have it built in a way that this is a contract that in good faith, it's got track. It will run 10 years. But there are off ramps if either the county or the township for some reason didn't want to pursue it. And if the township leaves, then we don't have to pay the $2 million back. If we leave, we would have to pay them their principal back. And I think it's really reasonable. But in the long run, making governing decisions like this, every year that you help MERS get better is going to be an improved budget every year after. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? All right.
So no action needed on C. D is the amortization extension consideration, and this is an action item. So let me pull it up here. here. I've got a summary sheet that I put together for this as well. The document is a 19-page document, and it's not formatted the exact way of evaluation because this is more of the actuaries doing a kind of mid-course evaluation of a very specific nature, so it's not as detailed. But what it includes in there in summary, you can see that of all of our pension groups, all but 3 would qualify for adding 5 years on the tail end. So what that means is there would be less required contributions because we now have a longer period of time to make those contributions to get there. If we were to only do the 5 years and not have a commitment to add more money to MERS, we would be paying more in the long run because we're now paying that debt over an additional 5 years, right? So anybody who's ever refinanced a car, added additional years to it, you're extending the cost of that. But if you have the commitment that you have in the Delta contract, you all adopted a fund balance policy. The piece that hasn't been adopted is if there's a surplus, how do you spend it? If you make part of that policy, a portion goes to MERS, that helps ensure that adding the 5 years plus the good governing pieces you're building in the policy will make it to where you're not only getting more time to pay it, but you're paying it down faster. So reduces the risk of paying more in those last 5 years. The impact of this would be a reduction in pension costs in year 1 of close to $800,000. This assumes that the Delta contract passes, at least $2.2 million is committed into the fund specified, and that we continue to make, I think, at least $284,000 annual contributions over the 10 years. But this is the fruit of such labor that you're looking at there. So the request we would have, I mean, obviously I would take questions too, but the administration would request a motion to move this to the full board next week, authorizing county administration to enter into and pursue the steps necessary for reamortization of the eligible county pension groups.
Okay, do we have a motion to accept that? Who had their hand up? Oh, Commissioner Barber, you move this motion? You're moving this forward? Yes, I am. Okay, do we have a support? Okay, so moved and supported, okay. Question, Ben.
Yeah.
This can't fail and backfire on us, this request, can it?
I would say the worst case scenario, and this is being candid, would be to implement this savings and then turn around and think, oh, let's use this money to add back every cut that we just made. I'd say that would probably, I'm not saying that there's not room for something, but I think you have to realize adding the 5 years without an additional commitment to pay down the debt faster will only cost the county more money over the term. But we've got to get a budget, employees need raises, and you guys have a lot of tough decisions you're gonna have to make now between September. So I guess that would be the one thing to think of. And then obviously if we act in good faith throughout this process and we have a contract for 10 years with Delta, it's not an issue. If contract didn't make it to 10 years, if we're not the ones breaking it, then we don't have to pay back the $2 million. We would lose the $250,000 that we would be making annually through the admin fee. So it's in everybody's interest, not just us, but Delta's to have the term of the contract, really.
Okay, so we just have to be diligent in honoring.
Yeah. Ooh, and sorry. And one thing I'll say is it's not like MERS is sending us a check for $800,000. The way that translates to the budget is the rate that we pay for every dollar earned in wages. The required contribution to MERS will go down. So what that means is this $800,000 is going to be an improvement to Delta's contract as well, which is part of why we had this incentive as part of a closing on the agreement, was because as these rates come down, it reduces the personnel expense of the contract because we're reducing the cost for having a command officer or a road deputy. I forgot to mention that, but it's good. It's worth noting.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Wright.
I think I missed something. Why are we not extending those three groups?
Yep, it has 100% to do with how well they're funded. Originally, Command was not going to be available, but that's part of the one-time cash injection, is moving them to eligible. Conceivably, you all, depending where we land in the budget, if we were able to put additional money to help fund some of these groups, we might be able to see if we could bring them into the process. The anticipated implementation date of this would be October 1st of this year, so it'd be starting on the next budget cycle. So it does give us some time if there was a way to do that, but it's based on the amount of assets they have to cover their liabilities.
Okay, so that also would be another factor in why we want to be conservative even when we go this way, instead of using the money that would be available, but not
Yeah.
recommended, because we're stacking debt on debt. So,
And unless you make more payments up front, all it does is elongates the process. But the commitment of reinvesting that money back into getting ahead of stuff, that's where you really start making inroads, you know?
Okay.
Not that I'm a huge Dave Ramsey guy, but right, the snowball effect, you know? You attack the highest interest, highest, yield debt, and you work your way back because that's where you get your biggest proceeds from. Even if paying a smaller one with a lower interest rate feels nice, it doesn't get you as much bang for your buck.
Okay.
thank
Any other
you.
questions? All right, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, we passed.
All right, next up is retirees' health. I did not get to do some kind of summary, but it's it is a 36-page document. But this, earlier this year, I think in May, we adopted just an awareness of the methods they would be using to do this valuation earlier. So we kind of introduced that whole concept of like demographic, how long people live, like health and et cetera, that they use to forecast what your expenses are through this. A couple things to note, because I know this is some of our first time through on this. So in 2024, we transitioned from an employee-paid plan where, as employer, we were self-funding a retirees' health plan to the Medicare Advantage marketplace. The difference of that is instead of us holding the long-term liability, you're buying insurance on the market, so therefore our obligation is based on the premium that we are under contract for. But what that means is every time we negotiate a contract and the premium changes, the funded ratio here will change. So prior to adopting the purchase on the marketplace, this plan was funded at like 32%. So right now you look at it, you see 71.9. Last year it was 71.7 funded. That looks really good. It's a soft number, and I just say that because we did a price lock for 30 months. It will expire in 2027. When we go to renew, communities last year were seeing anywhere from 5 to 10% increases. We still have another year ahead of us, and there's, at the federal level, some divestiture of health insurance going on. If that impacts the Medicare Advantage marketplace, we could be looking at anywhere from like a 15 to 22% increase in our premium. So 71% looks great. I just don't want you to be super excited about it, because when I come to you next year with our bids for renewing that, it's not going to look as good. But we started at 32, so even if it goes down 25%, it's still better than 32. At some point, if that threshold begins to get blurry, and then we might discuss going back to being self-funded, but hopefully that's a very long time away. So it's a lot of work to switch. There's no action required on this, and I hit all my points that I wanted to cover. Any questions? Welcome.
Seeing none, moving on to item F.
And this is a closed benefit group. That's the last thing I'd say. We closed it in 2006, 2007, meaning the only people that still qualified for the benefit were those who started before that date. And as of today, Melissa said, we have 49 active employees working in it. At some point, everyone with this benefit will retire and it will become fully a closed liability with no payroll revenue going into it. So the 49 people working as they work and earn, we're contributing money to it. At some point, it will just be a fund based on the balance of assets set aside, and the board will either have to contribute general fund money to it or make decisions at that time. But we sit at 71.9% today, and we'll take it one day at a time. So then capital improvement bonding.
Did we cover the delegates? Item
Oh, geez.
All right. You got a
All
little
right.
list there.
Yeah, we do. So it's the annual conference to MERS. Every year, as a member of MERS, we have to assign delegates because they make election offices for their governing body and stuff like that. So we are able to participate in that process. We're proposing that officer delegate, that Commissioner Pearl Wright be the one representing the board. I would go as an officer alternate, and then we have 2 employees, our payroll specialist and Miss Morris in the clerk's office. They do it's like a conference, but they have a lot of sessions that are going to be useful and helpful. I got to go one year, I didn't get to go last year, but I really like they do an investment update about how the fund has been performing and what they're prioritizing for the next year to try to mitigate risk in the marketplace. And sometimes it's helpful to get a sense what's going on with our pension fund. So I'm looking forward to it. We would need a motion to adopt these delegates.
We've all been approached and they're all agreeable.
They are,
I'm not concerned if you are, but
okay?
everybody else.
No? Oh. Well, we can, I thought so. It's possible that Ms. Morris may not be interested in going. Sorry, I thought that we had already confirmed some of this, so, okay.
I'm waiting.
I'll move it pending her agreement.
Great,
Otherwise, we can just remove her.
correct. We could just move forward with 1 delegate and 2 alternates. Yeah.
Okay, so
And there were no other submissions, so I want you to know there weren't like 9 other employees like chomping at the bit to go and talk about actuarial math,
understand why
so,
not.
yeah.
Can it be
Yeah.
another elected official? Or no?
Wow.
You were correct. Sorry.
She's good.
You were correct. Now, an elected official could go.
Oh.
Could go to the conference, but they're not a voting member. So Jeannie is in that group, so she can be a voting member, but anyone else could go to learn about it. It's just that you wouldn't be able to vote on it.
I was just saying, if you're gonna need a name and a place, I would put my name in there, but that's,
Andrea
Ben's good with it.
confirmed.
I'm good.
She confirmed you were right, Ben.
Oh, good. Good, good.
So we would remove Kimberly Morris's name.
No,
Nope, she's good.
confirmed that she-
Oh, she did? Oh, she is. So we're not, no changes then? Okay, thank you for that.
She was confused with that other MERS conference that.
Okay. All right.
But you know, if there are commissioners that are interested in stuff like this, sometimes there are educational opportunities like this. So let us know. This conference happens every year. So if you're interested, just drop us a line.
Okay, I'll put that in my bucket list.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we have a motion on the floor here? Okay, so we have a motion, but it's now seconded? Support. Okay, supported by Mark. Okay, any questions, comments, concerns? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Okay, motion passed.
Next is,
Those people can now celebrate.
yeah. Actually following by my agenda, the next is the capital improvement bonding sales summary. This is a sheet that we put together to help explain where we landed with the bonding offering that we did. So to refresh memories, we were authorized to go, I think, up to 12 million, and we ended up doing a portion for public improvement projects here at the county, and then the portion for the remainder of our assessment costs through the bank intercounty drain. For comparison, it starts out by showing, had we done nothing and just default been included in the drains process for going out to bond, that was what our quoted price was. Then below is where we actually landed, because I wanted you all to see the decision you made and the effect that it had, so that you can see that, you know, doing additional work does pay off. So just comparing the cost for the drain itself, we saved principal of about $152,000. Part of that was going to be the closing costs. Ours came out to $82,000 doing it on our own, and it was isolated or split between the two project offerings. And then the interest costs, because we chose to do it over 20 years versus over 30 years. So paying it off faster always saves you more money because there's less interest capitalization. And our payments are a lot more consistent. So as you can see, the max payment we'll ever pay on the schedule that we adopted is about $40,000 less than the max it would have been if we bonded with the drainage district. But the average is more, and that's because on average, we're going to pay more because we're paying it off over 20 rather than 30 years. Part of the reason when the bank district bonds, they have to follow state code, which sets it up to where all of the principal payments have to be equal payments. So what you have is like a tail where you have a bunch of interest at the front plus fixed principal. And so it ends up being your first years of the bond as required by Michigan law are the biggest payments that you make, and then it slowly just gets less and less and less. So we opted to do this, and that's part of the effect it had. The total or true interest cost, TIC, it's an industry term for bonds. I liken it to like the APY that you see on your consumer stuff. It's supposed to help just make sense of like what the actual cost is or the rate of return. Other than that, they diverge in terms of their similarities, but our TIC for the bonding came out to 4.26. It actually came out to like 4.26 in 5 decimal places, but I rounded up for everybody's sanity here. And the interest rate for the first 12 years is 5%, and the interest rate for the remaining 8 years is 4.27%. We also bonded as a tax-free entity, which means that it was a tax exempt bond offering, which means that people don't have to pay federal tax on it. So there was a premium markdown built into the cost of the bond because of its tax advantage status. So that benefited us in terms of our market. If you're looking at those interest rates and wondering why it ended at 4.267 or 4.26, that is why.
Any questions? How many commissioners do we have here under the bank's drain? Just 2? Okay. All right, thank you.
Next is a summary of work that we did. So this is just a bank intercounty drain final analysis impact to the county general fund. I'm going to highlight some things, but I will say I wish we could have done more. So while we took actions that benefited us, the county, which benefits all residents of the county, and we took actions that benefited us and everybody who is attached to the project, homeowners, township, county, Ingham County too, right? We did a lot of heavy lifting with this as a county, and it wasn't enough. And I want to acknowledge that there are a lot of homeowners that are struggling with this and with other drainage projects. But this is when we invested time, what we were able to do. So it's worth highlighting, even though it was still just a monstrously large project, and it's going to be difficult for people. So I want to start off by acknowledging that. We allocated the remainder of our American Rescue Plan Act funding, ARPA, through an infrastructure offering allowable under the federal code, and that was $3.3 million. We estimate the interest reduction over a 30-year period was about $3.2 million, which reduced our annual payment by $141,000. The next thing we did, we were able to secure a state grant. We had letters of support from Delta, from commissioners, from elected officials, I believe the sheriff, Doug, everybody everybody really came around, and Logan Bailey did a wonderful job helping us secure this funding, so did Claudine Williams. So that money was applied to the top of the project. Of the 5 million, about 493,000 benefits the county directly by lowering our assessment. The rest is divided out to everybody based on the apportionment process. We estimate that reduced our interest by about 382,000, and our annual payment reduced by about 26,000. Next, we did the bonding directly rather than doing it over a 30-year through the drain. So we estimate that that saved us 826,000 in interest over the life and 152,000 a year in an annual payment. The next is we did a thorough review of the 14A calculation because it had dramatically jumped right at the end of the project, which we had concerns on. And so we did a GIS analysis of the district and were able to provide that feedback at the day of review. Ultimately, 21% is the rate that the county at large was decided on, down from a little over 24% that was proposed initially. So that was about a $2 million principal change for the county directly, which we estimate was about 2.4 million in interest and 73,000 in payment. And the last thing, which is not directly ours, but I will highlight it, because we had the ARPA, because we had the state grant, Spicer was able to negotiate contracts in bulk purchase for materials, which led to the final cost allocation going from 60 million down to 54, anyway, down $1.6 million. So while that wasn't direct, but it was the leveraging the funds that we were able to secure that helped make that possible. So I just want to acknowledge that benefited every homeowner and every property owner. The 5 million from the state grant benefited all parties involved, and everybody is an Eaton County resident, so the stuff that benefited the county in a roundabout way does benefit them. And so in total, we looked at this as a interest reduction of about close to 7 million, 6.8 million, and a reduction in annual payment of 392,000. So those are just estimates. It's really hard to quantify some of these things sometimes, you know, to Logan's point with the tech stuff, sometimes it's tough to quantify. We took an attempt because it took so many man and staff hours to get where we were, but, yep.
Okay, question, Commissioner Barber.
Yes, if additional appropriations are secured, that will go to the outstanding portion of the drain, so that'll benefit only the people that chose to bond with the intercounty bank drain. So anybody that prepaid, be it an individual or organization, will not receive any benefit from that appropriation?
So you're gonna love my answer. It depends on on what the bill says. So I know that at the state level, that was put in for 10 million additional, but that was, at the time that I heard about it, was going to be specific to provide relief to the homeowners. I'm sorry, maybe I don't understand your question.
So I believe what your question is, if somebody prepaid, they would not benefit from that 5 million.
If
correct.
additional appropriations are.
Right. So when we had talked about this, it was trying to figure out a way, and we had talked to the individuals that will be doing the assessments, if they can go back and give us a breakdown of everyone's assessments, whether they paid early or not, and they would get relief based on the assessment and not based on the fact that somebody hadn't prepaid. So everybody would get something. Now, what that would mean is that if there would have to be an actual check written to the individuals that had prepaid. So that's what we're working on. We did tell Spicer, who would be doing it, that that's something we would do, and we did discuss that with Representative Whitwer, because she was concerned about that as well.
Well, my concern is for those individuals in that district that prepaid, you know, that they would receive some relief.
That's what we would be working toward, yes.
Commissioner Moudry.
Being a homeowner in the bank's district,
I was in a very precarious position. I was here on this board fighting to get things lowered for the county. And knowing that whatever we saved here could be added on to my assessment at home. So it was kind of an odd situation, okay? And I just wanted to point out, since this is the subject that we're talking about, there is activity going on in that district. There is, if you want to take a look, there is movement on the construction today and has been for the past week. Thank you.
Questions, comments? In our bonding process, what is our protection from cost overruns?
Well, for the project itself, they have in their computation of costs, they have like a contingency fund, yes. Yes, but I guess realistically, at the end of the project, if they're under, then there's money that they have to disperse back to people that are within the drainage district or part of the process. If they're over, I'm a little murky on that. I don't know if it would transition to drain maintenance or if they would have to come back and ask for more money. Melissa? I think they're usually pretty good at hitting their marks, but
Worst case scenario, though, would be, I mean, if you're looking at an additional 5 million, the worst case scenario on that that it would catch up in the next year's assessments. That's what they try really hard, like Ben said, to do the best calculation and plan for that, because they don't want to do that. Nobody wants to go back and say, we underestimated what our costs were. So I don't imagine that would be an issue based on the way that they did it. And I know that Ben, when he had met with Spicer, went over that because that's always a concern. And normally it wouldn't be as much of a concern when you're looking at a $2 million bond and a project, but when you're talking about a project like this, you don't know. But I'm confident that Spicer did that work.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Wright?
Well, I just want to say thank you for all your work. And I know that an easier route would have been to just put it out there and finance it to 30 years. But given the fact that we're looking for staffing positions, any reduction is a reduction in the budget that we have to work with as a board to try to staff this county for services to our residents. So thank you for the reduction.
Yeah, and that's a really good thing to note, because when we had done the budget projections first, we did not have the cost for the county going forward in our projections. So we would have had to add that back into our projections. So we were really heavy on needing this, so we didn't have to make additional reductions in the future to the other areas of the budget.
Rodri? Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, we don't have an action item here.
nope, that was just an update.
All righty.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah,
Anything else?
Absolutely. And then I'll come up and, or no, I'll have something to say when Chad does his presentation about capital improvement stuff. So but other than that, that concludes my report.
Before we go into our finance director report, let's take a 10-minute recess, because I think she's going to talk long. And we'll be back here at 10:25. Okay, we are back in session. We will pick up where we left off with item 9, our finance director, Melissa.
Good morning. So I have several reports for you today. I'm going to start off with our Blue Cross Blue Shield health insurance analysis. You can see I did provide additional reports because our quarterly settlement from the January to March time period was able to be captured. So that information for those 6 months from October 1 through March 31 is included at the very end of your reports. However, you'll notice the front cover sheet goes through May to show the additional expenses that have happened. So the return from the settlement was approximately $280,000, I believe. So it was a pretty substantial return from this quarter. And it is higher than last year, this time frame, by almost $200,000. So that has helped stabilize this fund, but we do continue to monitor it. Also, you can see in these reports that the retirees' health portion, the expenses for active employees or for active retirees, has decreased by more than $400,000 compared to this time last year. So that is a direct impact of our Medicare Advantage program, and that helps to continue to stabilize this fund and the retirees' healthcare fund. So, and it will have a direct impact on the longevity of that program. So, are there any questions regarding the health insurance reports?
I don't see any.
Okay, then I will move on to my child care fund reports. And I can say, honestly, these reports have not changed substantially from what was presented last month. We continue to have very high chargebacks from the state that we have no control over, and we continue to monitor that. So, are there any questions regarding the child care fund?
You said chargebacks. So the positive or negative?
So they end up being expenses for the county. What happens is the state pays these expenses on behalf of the county, and then the county is charged back for those fees. So,
How does that impact our budget?
so that is a direct expense for the county. Again, like I said, we don't have any control over their placement costs, so the state shares portion of that cost, and the amount that we experience is just our share, but it's basically because of the placement of a youth. If they're placed in a high-risk, high-needs setting, then it's going to cost substantially more per day to cover that cost. So.
Okay, not good news, but thank you.
So with that one, I will move on to our monthly financial report. I will say thank you, Treasurer Rainette. Interest revenues continue to be higher than budgeted, so he is continuing that trend, and I truly appreciate that from a budgetary standpoint. Our expenses continue to be exactly as we've projected and as budgeted. At this point in the fiscal year, we're expecting, we should be seeing around 70% of our budget expended, and that is pretty close to on track. We do have a little bit of personnel savings due to employee turnover. The 12% of annual unfilled positions has impacted our budget for that. So,
Any questions on that from Melissa? I guess you're doing a great job.
okay. So then my next item is regarding the Eaton County Fire Training appropriation. And I was contacted by members of the Eaton County Fire Training Committee regarding a state appropriation to build a state-of-the-art fire training facility. This was a state appropriation that went through in 2024. And so I am working with committee members to assist in the funds. They were appropriated directly to the county, and we're working to get them appropriated to the agency itself rather than the county. So we have a letter of support that is drafted regarding that to send to the appropriate parties. But we know that this project is an investment that's important. So
I just want to add one thing to that. So that's the option that is the easiest for all parties. The other option, if the money cannot be given directly to that committee, then the county would have to take in that money, accept the money. Under our grant policy, you would take the admin fee. Our office would have to administer it if we can't have that entity just apply for grant funds. So the county has always had to be the subrecipient monitor for any grant money that goes out. So ideally, what Melissa said is what we're going for, but there's an option that we may have to take the money, potentially have them ask for a grant under that, or we would have to do all the monitoring and we'd have to go out to bid for the project. Those are the things that they've already done so far. So it's going to delay them because it would have to go through our purchasing process.
but we are working with them as well as the state legislature to make sure that we are expediting this process and project because it is such an important project. So, yes, Jean?
So, Melissa, we wouldn't have to levy the full 15% if they're actually doing the work on it, would we?
Based on our grant policy, we would need
We
to
would.
request it
Okay.
if it's allowable as an expense.
Okay, I was just thinking if they've, done so much work already.
Or the other option is that the committee could make a motion that they not charge the 15%. However, depending on the level of monitoring from my office,
That's what I
it may be pretty substantial. And if it is a fixed asset or a capital asset, due to the dollar amount of it, we may need to be monitoring it for the next 20 years. So
Oh, wow.
that's part of internal discussions that our office has been having, trying to navigate that.
And this is the result of what was basically a simple clerical error, and it was never supposed to come to us in the first place, correct?
The intent was that it would go directly to the fire training committee so that they could build the facility. So trying to make sure that that intent aligns with the actual appropriation.
To add to that, when the request was made, this committee, in order for it to be appropriated to not-for-profit, it would have had its own tax ID number. That process hadn't been done. So it was put in as a county, because it's Eaton County Fire Training, so that would have been the delay in it. But that was after the appropriation was written, so you can't change it, so
Okay,
trying to get.
thank you. Any questions on that for Melissa or Connie? All right, thank you. Moving forward.
I'm sure more information regarding that will come, so I just wanted to continue to keep the committee apprised on that. And additionally, so my next piece is our remonumentation grant, and I just wanted to provide an update regarding that. So the county has had a really long-standing agreement with a contractor, Mr. Ron Lester, for the remonumentation services and the grant. The individual assists with coordinating the surveyors and managing all aspects of the grant itself. We have a contract for him from January 1st of 2025 through December 31st of 2025. Mr. Lester has notified us that effective December 31st, he will be done providing these services for the county. So we will be going out to bid. Mr. Vandermark, our equalization director, and I will be finalizing an RFP by the end of next week, and we will get that published so that we can have that start effective December 30 or January 1st of 2026. So.
And how many years would remain on that?
So my intent for an RFP would be a multi-year RFP for that. So I would expect between 3 and 5 years is what I would want to do. Currently, it is a year-to-year, but I think we need some stability, and particularly since this is a longstanding grant and a longstanding project, stability would be a good thing.
Thank you. Any questions on remonumentation? Because it's been an ongoing topic. We always get a thrill out of this one.
Maybe we have Mr. Lester come in for his retirement appreciation.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be a good idea.
We can absolutely contact him so that he can come in December.
We always talk about it.
He's been to this committee, actually. He has presented, but it's been a little while.
I've been seeing him since 2005.
So I will, Mr. Vandermark and I will contact Mr. Lester and request that he come. So,
Mr. Boudry.
One quick question. If anybody has a question about this project, who would they contact?
So anything regarding the remonumentation, the grant, the project itself, I would say direct questions to Mr. Vandermark or to me, and we can filter them through to the appropriate parties.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Melissa, you have anything else?
Nope, that concludes my reports. Thank you.
Onward to item 10, capital improvement. And I see Mr. Powers coming to the podium. Good morning, Chad.
Morning, Chairman and Commissioners. I'll go through my report today, and then we'll talk about the capital improvement bond priority list when I get to the end here. I think last month I reported that we were wrapping up the generator repair. I think it was actually the day that we met, this committee met. That has since been complete, and we're back up and running with no issues with the radiator repairs for the jail generator that had failed. Also, earlier this month, we completed the county clerk and treasurer moves. They swapped offices essentially, and we were able to do that all internally. There was no contracted work done. The maintenance team and IT staff was able to complete those. And I think both the clerk and treasurer would agree it was relatively painless. We were able to do a lot of the stuff beforehand, and then on a Friday, when the offices were closed to the public, we made the move, and they were back operational the following Monday. On the east side of the complex, the demonstration meadow that the Conservation District has obtained grants for, that you guys have been asking a lot about what's going on with that spot over there. Why is the grass killed? And so that has been complete, seeded, and of course, with these these torrential downpours that we get, it kind of washes that away. So you'll see some little seedlings coming up of a cover crop that we put in there to help stabilize that bank before we lose all of it down the drain. So working with the drain office, we put some straw bales there to help filter anything going down that, making its way to the pond. So you'll start seeing things pop up over there. Just yesterday, Conservation District, with some volunteers, put some native plants around our sign over there on the northeast side, and then I believe this weekend we're gonna do the one that's out on the south end by the jail. So you'll start seeing some stuff pop up in there. They obtained that from a private grant and volunteer and a little bit of staff time as far as prepping the site, but most of it's been volunteer work. Also working with Eric in Technology Services, we're looking at rolling out laptops for my maintenance staff. Currently, we have traditional desktops in some of the buildings. The jail, for example, we have an office area with all of our technology and stuff on building management system. What that means is if we need to check and see, for example, if an exhaust fan's running or a rooftop unit, somebody needs to stay at the computer and command it, and then somebody needs to physically see if it's working. So a little more efficiency. This will allow them to be a little bit more mobile. For example, over at the DHS and Health Department areas, we have one office in the Health Department. If there's something that's going on in DHS, we need somebody else to help out and make sure that all that technology is working. So the laptop, and Eric's going to repurpose these from surplus that get exchanged. So there will be no additional cost. It's just an exchange instead of the desktops that we have now. So that'll be coming in the next couple months. We're gonna try a couple of them as a pilot and make sure it's gonna work for us, and then we'll roll those out in the coming months. And as we get into the capital improvement recommendations that I have here, I just wanted to note that when we have this extreme heat, it really taxes our equipment. When it gets up into the 90s, high humidity, with some of our old technology and old equipment, it's really tough to maintain temperature and keep everybody comfortable in our buildings. And so the maintenance staff has to do a little bit extra monitoring of that stuff to make sure, because it doesn't take long. Obviously, it gets into the 90s and we have something go down, it doesn't take long before the phone starts ringing and people are uncomfortable. So we have had a couple of failures. Most of it's been minor equipment. We're waiting on a part for an air conditioning unit over at the 551 building, but hats off to my maintenance team for staying on top of that stuff. So, and then finally, the capital improvement bond program, our upcoming funding. You'll see a priority list that I've established here for the first 3 years, for that funding. I know Ben would comment on some of that as far as the specifics of when the bond sale was and when it's available and all that. I'll leave that to Ben, but the concrete and drives and sidewalks around the courthouse is obviously a priority. We want to get that going as soon as possible. The big one on the list there, there's a couple big ones there, but the elevators, we've been talking about that for quite a while. We have 7 of them here at the complex, and the newest one is a 1993 model, so over 30 years on that. And so next week, I'm working with our elevator service contractor to come up with a rough order of magnitude or preliminary cost estimates and prioritize which ones we should be tackling first and kind of go through that list. I do want to note that it will be through a bid process. Otis is our service contractor, but that doesn't necessarily mean they'll be awarded the project of the modernizations of our elevators. It'll be bid out to several contractors. And then that'll be up to our review to determine how we proceed with that. So another one is the door monitoring system. Essentially, that's our alarm system. So that's a antiquated system that if some of you remember, we were getting a lot of door alarms, faulty alarms, and I think the credit to that now goes to Connie because she turns it off in the morning when she gets here. So we don't have those. We still get them occasionally on the weekends, but not nearly as bad as it was because she's been turning it off when she gets here. But it's an old system. It needs to be revamped in all the buildings, and I have that on there as well. I'll be working with Kelly at 911 to make sure it integrates with, with her system because it goes to them first. And if there's a need to dispatch, then obviously they do that. Another big one is the generator or battery backup system for the courthouse. Now, this is something I'll need to do a feasibility study on to make sure, see where it lands as far as cost-wise, if it's worth pursuing. I've got a rough estimate there, but I would like to see what it will take to, one, capture and retain some of the energy that we're getting in our solar systems, and then also a generator that would fully back up the courthouse in the event of a power outage, because right now, we send people home, they get paid, that's the cost, obviously, but we have to weigh out those costs and see if it's a worthwhile investment. So that's on my list.
Ed?
Yeah, sorry.
Question, when we were offered the possibility of battery storage when the solar system was, or solar generation system was proposed, excuse me, that was, the amount that they quoted us was quite a bit more than that $1 million you've got here. So this is not a complete storage system.
Correct, correct. It would be supplemental that would supplement some of the energy that we're capturing in our solar arrays. It would still require a generator to, but it would offset some of that, the need for the generator. It would use the battery stuff first and then kick the generator, is the way I envision it in the discussions I've had. It'll be interesting to see where the numbers come back at, with the current estimate, so.
All right, thank you.
And then finally on the list, there is the courthouse air handler system. I know you've heard me talk about this before, but it's a 1976 model. It's been retrofitted. It's been about all we can do with it. And we joke that it was designed for people that could still smoke cigarettes or cigars at their desks. So we have air changes. It was designed that way. We've retrofitted it to make it not do that anymore, but you can imagine the technology a little bit different 50 years ago than it is today. So, and again, just to reiterate, all these will be bid out competitively. We'll look at the best options for the county and make our decisions accordingly. And Ben, did you want to comment on your part of that? I guess if there's any other questions, I'll take those before we move to Ben.
Commissioner Holmes?
As far as the elevators, I wonder, is that how much of a replacement of the components, what parts of it actually age that makes it necessary? Just curious.
So typically when you do a modernization, they take everything out and retrofit a new car and hydraulic system. Everything will be brand new. And I should note also that the state elevator code is going to change, I believe in 27 or 28, which is going to require a lot of upgrades to elevators, and this is going to help right when we need it, because we would have had to make those upgrades anyway and not got a new elevator. Had we just piecemealed it, it would have cost just as much probably to retrofit these upgrades than to do a whole new car system. So yeah, everything gets replaced from the interiors to the hydraulic jack. Usually they may be able, they'll test and make sure they can use the jack. They may have to drill a new jack. And typically, once it takes, once we get them on board, it'll take several months of design and material, procure material, and then we would once we have everything ready to go, then we'd schedule the shutdown. And obviously, we're going to do it so it impacts business as little as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Woodry?
I'm going to use Chad's presentation as a segue. Now, since the lightning and rainstorm is happening outside right now, if we lose power here, okay, can we legally continue with the meeting? Or is there an open meetings problem with continuing with, because the video system is going to go out?
No, that's not applicable. You don't have to record. That's a decision the board has made. So if it goes down, you can still continue the meeting.
That's what I thought, but I didn't want to make the assumption.
Yes,
So we can carry on.
correct.
Okay, as long as we can see each other.
Yes, let's hope that doesn't happen. And you said it, which means things can go wrong, so.
Thanks for
Okay.
jinxing us, Mark.
Yeah, and another thing is that I have talked to Chad about a possible program for battery backup with our solar system. And my thought is that there are companies out there that use used AV, used electric vehicles, batteries. And maybe we could somehow get into a cheap way of getting battery storage. And Chad and I talked, and unfortunately, there's nothing out there right now like that. But I think we should probably keep our eyes open and jump on any possible program like that. Thank you.
Any other questions for Chad? All right, Chad. Anything else for us?
Yeah, so I will just talk a little bit, if that's okay.
Certainly.
Okay, so the bond that we did, initially, we thought we would bond for 6 million, but we only have 3 years to spend it under state law. Under the authorization for this bond, what we did was we can actually split it up. So we did 3.5 in the first 3 years. And then at the end of the third year, this body can decide whether they want to go out and bond for another 3.5 at that time if we want to extend the capital development and to other projects. So I'm going to ask for a motion to move this prioritization list, but it is a list. It's going to take probably the full 3 years to spend $3.5 million. So what that means is if we get an appropriation from the feds or from the state, and all of a sudden we can use matching funds to leverage additional money, you can always modify this list up until the point that Chad's finished the project, right? Can we turn away elevators once they get here? No. Yeah, probably, okay. But just keep that in mind too. So if there are opportunities to maximize this money to leverage other funds, we can do that, and we would bring up those opportunities to you all. So we would request a motion today to adopt the project prioritization as presented, and again, this can be amended. And then 3 years from now, you'll have the opportunity to decide whether to bond for another tranche for additional projects. Because you saw the capital improvement plan that we presented in April. There are a lot more projects on that list than are on this, so there's plenty more we can get done, but one step at a time.
So does everyone understand? Okay, you're moving it, so we all understand what he's requesting. Okay, moved. Do we have a second? So, okay, we have a second. Any further discussion? I'm curious, Chad, because this upgrade to our elevators sounds like it's state mandated through code. Are there any grants or anything available to offset the cost of this?
I don't believe so. Generally, I don't know that answer. I guess I should, before I speak on it, check into that.
Okay, that would be nice.
And let me clarify, it's not a requirement to replace the whole elevator. It's, for example, I think they have, the new code will require a sprinkler head in the pit, a phone in the elevator, to call for an emergency. We would have to make those type of upgrades anyhow, and after it's all said and done, the cost would probably be, it makes more financial sense to do a complete replacement than to piece into those additional code requirements.
Okay.
And right now, the elevators aren't one brand. You've got different types of elevators around, and some of them don't make components anymore too.
Right.
So you have to custom order.
That's the ironic thing is, when I mentioned our youngest elevator from 1993 is over 30 years old, that one is the one that has the least amount, that's the one that has parts that are obsolete. So it's probably one of the first ones we'll be doing.
To the point of, well, first of all, I'm 1 year older than that elevator.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. No, but part of our request for funding was around ADA compliance, which we roped in 2 of the elevator replacements, which, of course, in talking to some of our elected officials and their staff, we were also looking and researching for infrastructure grant opportunities like that, and they were essentially laughed at me when we're looking into it, but we weren't very successful. And then also they did not sponsor those requests anyway, so. But yeah, just to that point.
We'll shut that light off.
But we're still looking, and I spoke with Congressman Barrett's office, I think it was yesterday or the day before that, about animal control infrastructure as well as any of the other infrastructure asks that we did not get. And so their staff is helping us to try and coordinate. Maybe we can find something, but.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Okay, motion passed. Thank you. Anything else, Chad?
No, that concludes my update.
All righty, thank you. Item number 11, 24-25 budget amendments.
All right, so you have one budget amendment before you for the Parks Community Grant Program. This was approved by the Public Works and Human Services Committee earlier this week. So that is for discussion. I will forewarn you, next month, there will be quite a substantial list of budget amendments as we get close to closing out the fiscal year for 24-25. And that will include an amendment to the county clerk for the cost of our special election. We do not have a final cost on that as of yet because the local units have 84 days in order to submit cost reimbursement to the county. And some of the local units have not had a chance to give that to us. So just wanted to.
Thank you. To be clear, this is from our Parks millage. This is money that was allocated for grant funding to local parks, municipalities, that sort of thing. This was initially turned down at the Parks Work Group millage committee or grant committee, but it was, anyway, it's been resolved. The issue that we had was resolved, and so we elected to grant this. So if there's any questions on this particular budget amendment. Okay, do we have a motion to accept? Moved and supported. All right, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Okay, it's passed. Okay, item 12, policy updates.
So we added this as a standing item just because we have a lot of policy work that we're doing, and we have not lost sight of that by any means. But as you saw by the rest of the agenda, we were pretty well spoken for this month. So we'll be back at it next month. Purchasing is still really high on our list, especially now that we have capital improvement projects that'll be coming through. And we didn't touch on that at this meeting. I think we have previously, but the idea would be Chad Wyther maybe needs staff or contracting assistance. So we will probably have a list of project managers, maybe 3 firms that are pre-vetted that he can throw work to if he needs it, because his staffing has not been increased since 2008 when it was reduced. And then on top of that, for the purchasing piece, so we may have to roll it out in phases. So because we want to make sure that we're getting ready to spend the money, because we only have 3 years to spend it. But yep, and we will have more in future months. Yep.
Any questions for Ben on that one? All right, seeing none, there's no action there. We're on to item number 13, miscellaneous. Do we have any miscellaneous? No. No? All right. Item 14, bills. Who would like to move that we pay our bills? Okay, there we go. Support. Moved and supported. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, our bills are now paid. And item number 15, budget discussion for 25-26 budget.
Okay. So before you today, we have the updated budget. This includes all of the changes that were voted on at the May 30th meeting. This does not include any of the departmental requested adjustments from the last special full board meeting for the budget. Want to make sure that that's captured and that this committee accepts those departmental requests before it gets included. There are a few items. There is a list of reconciliation of changes on the next page. So you can see that we did remove Delta Township from the budget process because we do not have the final information for the change to that contract. So the revenue for Delta Township and then the expenses are completely removed. So that's taken out of contemplation for right now. Not to say that it won't be added back in for your next meeting, but I just want to make sure that that's not muddying the waters when we're talking about the budget as it stands. There are a few things that still need to be finalized. The medical care facility, their maintenance of effort, on May 30th, we did vote to reduce that down by 75% from $150,000 annually to $37,500. Based on discussions with the medical care facility as well as with our legal counsel, we believe that that actually needs to be reestablished at $150,000. In addition, now that our bond sale has happened, we have final information. So we need to include bond payment for the first year for both the bank intercounty drain as well as for the capital improvement bonding. And then the last item that I want to touch on is during her presentation, the county clerk discussed changing the software that she uses to a company called Fiddler. And she, in discussing the change, it is budget neutral, meaning we will receive increased revenue, and then also offsetting expenses for that. She has been working very closely with the vendor as well as with technology services, trying to make sure that this transition is very effective. And so she is here in the audience if you have any questions specific to that. But based on the discussions, I am actually recommending that we incorporate this as part of the budget process.
Any questions? Don't see any. Oh, yes, Commissioner Barber.
Yeah, I have it's not directed towards Melissa. I guess it would be directed towards the controller or Chairman Mott, but the end of the month budget meeting, what is our focus?
I was going to get to that, so thank you for the question.
Oh,
So
segue.
what we plan to do, since the board made the cuts that they did, and we can't put a projection in there with the requests from the departments that they gave until you authorize that, we'll come back and give you that type of estimate. At the 25th, that's going to be your big work session. That will be a full board meeting. We'll make sure that Jim announces that next week. Same thing as we've been doing, because we want to finalize all of the requests, all of the changes on the 25th, so that for August, you have only some cleanup maybe to do before we go into public hearing in September. And then for the next September Ways and Means meeting, you would have the ability to make additional changes before adoption of the budget at the September board meeting. But it's going to be, it'll be a really busy meeting. So the only three departments that are left to present is technology services, facilities, and then my office. So we'll be presenting what we do and what our request would be, and go from there. So we'll have all of that mapped out as a financial picture, but we will not be putting it through. So we have to do kind of like two estimates. So you'll have this one to see what it looks like. If this committee would approve for us, we don't have to take this to the board. If you approve what Melissa suggested, then we would add that back in to our projection with the medical care facility, the budget neutral Fiddler software, and our bond payments, because one being budget neutral, the others being really required based on what we're doing. If we can add that back in, we could ask for that motion here, which is what you would present to the full board on the 25th. If you're agreeable to that, I'd appreciate it. So I don't know if you want to talk about that part right now before I talk about some other things.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, any questions, comments concerning the motion? I guess not. Anything you'd like to say in addition before we vote?
No.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? All right, there you go.
Okay, and then I'd like to just go on to the worksheet, the first worksheet. Melissa, if you could change it, the budget worksheet. So we're obviously working on an awful lot of information to go into this budget. We want you to have the best numbers that you can have for the best decision-making, because it's going to be, again, a lot that you're looking at. One of the things that Melissa worked on was to put together where we are with what's been done so far and showing a projected surplus of 1.5 million for this next budget year if we went with just these cuts, and what that does to our fund balance from where it is at the end of 9/30/24 and where it would be if this budget holds true, and our current budget and this next budget. So we would have a $7.1 million fund balance for that year. But, and first, you had adopted the 10% fund balance policy for this 25-26. So Melissa did the calculation down at the bottom. It says minimum fund balance, 10% of current expenses. So we would go with that. What I've said all along in cuts, what we've done historically has been, wow, we can balance the budget, we can leave everything the same, we're good to go. The problem with that is our projections over the long term. So when the board adopted the financial stability plan and all of the things that you've adopted throughout the year to stabilize the budget, that goes against if you were to make that decision. If you look at the 27-28 budget, the fund balance, that surplus deficit is in the negative by 1.5 million, so we eat up what we would have for this year. Our fund balance policy, I will mention that we settled on 10% due to our financial situation currently, but looking forward, 15% is something that we would recommend you strive for so that we can stabilize even longer term. So, but even based on the 10%, you can see that we're not going to end up in the right position by 28-29. So after we go through all things being equal and everything worked out great budget-wise, we would not have a fund balance that you voted on. And then going back into the 29-30 budget, our projected fund balance, again, we're going into the negative. So we've done a lot of stabilization right now, but it won't carry us through. And it's the way that we do the budget, adopt the budget or work on it, is to say that all of the positions that you approve. Positions are the most critical. That's where our biggest expense is. So we will run that through the salary line that you see toward the middle. We will run all of those changes through what our actual expenses would be after you set the budget, approve that. And then that gives you the factor going forward. So right now, this is just an estimate. It doesn't have the actuals with the requests that the different departments made. If you look over to the left of your screen, it shows salaries, health, other fringes, and it shows you what factor we use to project. And you can see retirement, we've had to factor 10% over the years because that goes up and is more uncertain than the others. Health insurance has 4%, retirees health 7%. Some of those things would change, but we like to make sure that you can see the picture going out the full 5 years to show that it's really going to cost or increase more. So revenues, you can see more than likely stay pretty much the same. They don't increase as much as expenditures, but with all the changes that you've made so far, it looks better. So that's a good thing. And the other piece to this that Ben and I will be working on is what we talked about with Delta Township and MERS, and our MERS, and the administrative fees that we will get from that and potentially from other grants that we do. What you need to know and what you need to approve is not that the county just takes in those admin fees, whether they're 10% or 15%, and you just put them into the general fund without consideration for what the purpose of it is. So the purpose, if we focus on Delta, the purpose of that is to make sure that we cover the cost of certain things that are still required under the Delta contract, but that would be housed under the county sheriff division, I call Command Central. So you have to have your training officer, you have to have security, you have to have your property evidence officer, quartermaster. All of those things are part of that admin fee. We have also obligated 5% of that to go to MERS so that we can get ahead with the funding toward the police groups so that it reduces the cost, obviously, for the county, but primarily for Delta. That's part of the contract agreement because Delta really wants to see, those costs go down for them. And with the instability of how the valuations come through with MERS, we want to make sure that we're accounting for that and putting the money aside for it. That is what we are trying to do with financial stability. So that's what I'm asking that we look at going forward as to how are you going to stabilize this for this board and then for future boards and future administration, so that everybody has a good understanding of where our budget will be over a 5-year period. It's hard to project some of those things, but that's what we're looking to do. So we will break out the costs that are associated with that 15%, and we'll have factors going forward that will help us in our projections. So you'd actually see the cost of Treasurer's office to deal with the finances or for the revenue coming in, for our office to deal with hiring finances, for the sheriff's office to deal with the hiring, the training, the security, well, not security over here, but for the things that Delta needs the sheriff's assistance on. So long story short, we're going to break those things out so you actually can see what we're doing and you hold us as a county and all of the departments accountable for how that 15% is going to be spent. It also includes technology. We'll break it out. It'll probably be in a separate document so you can see it with just one line on here. I know I said a lot, but does anyone have questions on where we're headed as far as administration right now and what you want to see?
Commissioner Wright.
Okay, so the first thing that pops to my mind is the jail expansion millage is going to retire. Do we still have correction officers in the jail on that expiring millage that we have to address in staffing costs going forward?
Yes. Loud. So yes, if you look at the salary line item on this projection, you'll see that 26, 27, 27, 28 amounts go to 28, 29, and 29, 30. You will see that those jump quite a bit. That is to account for all of the positions being in the general fund. So the debt will be paid off by the end of 27, 28, and then we will have the positions moved back into the general fund. So our general fund costs will go up by that amount because that millage, the last levy on it is December of 26, so next year.
Okay, so I have another question. We have someone in the prosecutor's office, I believe, that was on a grant for like domestic violence and things. So how do we figure out what happens if the grants get cut?
So that grant, the prosecutor did not ask he has not had that grant for several years. It was an old grant that was eliminated for Eaton County. He requested it when the grant became available for him again, but that does not increase his staffing level. So what he asked for was to have that money to basically create the position who's already doing the work for domestic violence. So that's already being done in his office, it's required, but he can have a focused division on it, adhere to the grant requirements, but it's not going to increase the budget.
Staffing.
Correct, not for the grant. And there was a 25% admin fee, which, or 25% match what was required, I can't talk, and that was covered through in-kind. So there's no out-of-pocket county cost if that grant is accepted. And then the other piece was that he did ask for the administrative fee as allowed under the grant. So we won't be harmed at all for that grant, whether we receive it or not. We would get the administrative part of it, so that would be helpful.
So we don't have anybody else that I'm aware of or that you might be aware of that we have out on staff that are covered under grants. Now, I know friend of the court.
Oh, we have several staff members that are covered under grants. So if you bring up friend of the court, 66% of the costs are covered through a grant. It's a federal grant passed through the state of Michigan. Since it's required, it covers both the front of the court office and 2 positions that are in the prosecuting attorney's office for child support. Then there are several other grants that we have that are position-based. Any of those grants being eliminated, this board then has to evaluate whether you want to continue those going forward. So, but there are several positions that are either fully funded or partially funded through grants.
Right, like Veterans Affairs has a half and.
Well, that was a position that is, separate, an admin.
Okay, I'm just trying to, when we're projecting out that long, I'm trying to figure out how any of these type grants would affect our decision-making process.
So the way that it would work and the way that I would suggest we continue, we would project that those grants still exist. So Melissa and I know the grants that will still exist. We know that the Child Care Fund will still exist. We know Friend of the Court will. There are many other grants that will continue on. Specialty courts would be one. Those grants more than likely will all continue. They may shift what their focuses are, but they will continue.
Okay.
It's the only question would be what you're willing to fund that isn't covered by a grant. And if a grant was eliminated, every grant resolution that is written requires the department to come to you if any funding is cut before they can continue. So if there's a general fund contribution required, it has to be requested through this board. It can't continue without it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right.
Is there anything else, just to say it one more time, is there anything else that this committee or anyone here who's not on the committee wants us to do that you think of right now, or that you think of after here that you want us to put together? Because again, the 25th for that board meeting, that is when you need to make the decision. In our administration's opinion, strong opinion, all the employees, everyone needs to know where you're at. You can change something later, but they need to know right now what you're approving or not approving going forward so they can start making plans. I think if we take that on any longer, it's extremely harmful to what their lives are and harmful to the operations, because departments will have to change how they operate effective 10/1 if changes occur. The other thing, I guess I should have mentioned this before and I didn't, this does not include any pay increases whatsoever. So we have all of our bargaining units are wage reopeners. We have 2 that have come to us already and wanted to start negotiations for that. And then I told you, I'll say it again, I am going to put a wage increase in here for consideration going forward. So you will see that on the 25th as well. It will impact that bottom line here. So it might look good today, but if we add back in pay increases for everyone, that will impact the bottom line to the negative. To the positive for the fact that we would retain people, and our employees would, you know, not struggle as much as what they are right now.
Commissioner Whitaker.
Thank you. So I'm wondering, when we meet on the 25th, is there a process that we're going to use? It seems like it's going to be very subjective, and I'm just wondering if there's other than just talking about everything and going back and forth, is there a sense of how we decide position-wise what to keep and not to keep? Are you making a recommendation that we're going to work against, or?
So,
what I mean?
yeah, there's not, I mean, we don't have a scoring mechanism or anything like that, but what you're gonna do, we're gonna give you the dollars where we're at. You're gonna look at it, and you can all individually, we don't have to like move it, that you agree upon the numbers look good, right? And then you would look at everything individually, and that's where I got frustrated at the one meeting that we had on May 30th, when we were looking at cutting outside agencies, and I told you, these are decisions that this board has to make, and what you're going to have to do, and this is an individual decision that you then collectively discuss, and then you work to get the majority, see where that goes. That's what will be your decision. You need to look at everything individually. You've heard from people about cuts that are occurring in outside agencies that are very traumatic for those agencies and for your residents. But then you also have employees and positions here that are constitutionally mandated. If you cut portions of those, you are affecting services here as well. And you're looking at potential cuts and not being able to give a pay increase to employees. But you have to make those decisions individually. I mean, you really do. That's what you ran for.
Do you mean department by department?
Yeah, we'll go through and give you the whole list. We'll give you the requests that were made to modify what you cut, and then you can go through and discuss those individually. We can have the departments here if you want them to come up and answer a question that you have that they didn't answer or address at their presentations, the last presentations on June 27th. But you're just going to need to go through it. So here's how I see it. Something comes up, we're discussing it, and then someone's gonna make a motion and say, leave that out or put it back in. That's really what you're gonna do. Then you're gonna vote on it. And a roll call vote, which is what Chairman did last time. I would imagine Chairman would do that again, so that you're all looking at everything individually. It's really where we're at. It's what the public told you that they wanted. They want you all making decisions, and you all have different things that your constituents are looking at. And you then have the responsibility as the board over the entire county. So you have to look at what's important for the whole county and not just your area. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm just wondering, I guess, Jeannie and I were talking about how do we kind of triage, all the options there are, all the issues that there are with each position. Like, how do we kind of measure, or how do we ascribe a certain impact value? Some positions are more critical to daily operations, or some are more, I mean, they're all needed, but my point is that numbers are pretty black and white, and you can say yes or no to a number. But everybody has a different idea about what they think the value of the impact of that position is. And, things like how many departments have been, or how many, departments have been operating, with ridiculously low staff levels, and at what point do we try to reinvigorate their staffing in this particular opportunity? So there's a number of choices, and I've just been thinking about this a lot. How do we, evaluate a position other than just looking at the dollars? Because I think that's what you're talking about. We need to have some kind of conversation about, what the impact of these positions are, or losing them has on the whole county, and as well as our individual districts.
I'm going to give you the financial picture. I can give you information on what impact it has on how an office can function, just on the basis that I know they're all, functioning at minimum capacity right now. So if you cut this, you may have less of a response time for something. And then outside agencies and the departments all came to you on the 27th. So I sometimes may sound like I'm being disrespectful, but I just want you all to know, and I said for the last 2 years that I'm going to be kind of like this because I just think that's what my leadership needs to be for administration in the county. But you can't, without focusing on what they presented, you can't make those decisions. So I would recommend that everyone go back to your packet and to the meeting of the 25th or 27th of June. You can also go back to July 26th, in which every department gave a presentation last year, because those were in detail as well, and every department spoke up. That's where your decisions fall. I'm not making recommendations for cutting services. That's what your job is. I can make budget recommendations. I can tell you you need to cut an additional 1.5 million or that we're good right now, but I can't make those decisions on what services to provide. I can tell you some impacts, but I believe that every office that spoke told you what impacts there were. Number one, they all told you can't cut me. Don't cut. The ones who came back and presented something like an alternative, you have to determine if you accept that alternative or a portion of that request, right? But you can't put that on me or the departments at the last minute. That's why they came in. That's why they spoke to you. And so I'm just going to say, I suggest that if you're questioning it, go back and then, not to tell people how to do it, but rank what the priorities you think for you, for your residents, and then also for the entire county. What are the priorities? That's part of where we have to go right now. That's what you decided when you looked at a grant policy. The priority is to make sure that we secure admin funding so that we can cover administrative costs countywide. That's what you did when you established the 10% fund balance policy. So, that's what you're looking for. That's what I'm looking for, is the leadership of the board to tell me what to do.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Nicholson, or Nicole Christensen?
Really quick, Connie, I know that there was a set amount that we basically were going to have to cut. With what has been proposed so far to be cut, what are we still looking at to even keep our head above water?
So again, it's going to depend on how we apply every position cut that was made. So we still have to run it through. We're pretty close right here. You're looking at what you've got before you, that we would end with a $7.1 million fund balance. So my question to you will be, are you good with a $7.1 million fund balance? And are you good with the projection that it would result in 2.5 million in the 28-29? So, logically, your goal, and with financial stability, is not to do what historically has been done, and just that 7.1 million, you have to remember that includes what vacancies, will include what vacancies occurred in 23-24. So as everyone told you in their presentation, you've balanced the budget, and not everyone on the board, on the backs of the employees by unfilled positions and the remaining employees working, twice as hard on a job, and balanced it on the fact that we haven't given pay increases over the course of, the last 10 years, for sure. But that's part of it that you need to look at, is where your projection's going to be. So you all may feel differently. You may feel like, let's just take it 1 year at a time. I will say that that's what has gotten us into trouble, and that's not what the public said. You have to understand the public said no to 2 ballot proposals that were well explained, We went out, we talked, there was materials presented. You look at what Delta Township did on the public safety millage and the outreach that they did for that one. It still was voted down by the county. I mean, that's what happened. And what the public has said to you, and I know you guys have all received calls, you need to cut. You know, your expenses are too high. They have a feeling, you know, like we all look at each other's budget. You know, you shouldn't have bought that. You shouldn't have a cell phone that's like that, you know, just individually. How do you do that? Why do you know, we all look at that. So we can look at other communities and say, you know, you could have cut by, you know, not buying that vehicle. You could have cut by not building something. But you need to make those determinations. If that, I know I'm going on, but I'm really trying to focus and emphasize where you're going to go into the future. And I think stabilization is what you need to do. And the only way to do stabilization is through a revenue increase. That's done. We're not to that point. And through cuts. So again, we could start that meeting off saying, this is the amount we want to cut. And then Melissa and I can have our computers open and we can dump something into, you know, the system and say, okay, that's what this is going to cost additional, or that's what this will save. We can do that exercise first if you want to. And I don't care. I mean, I don't care how we want to do it. I just want to make sure it's a very interactive process, it's a very detailed process, and that all of you are making decisions that you can live with over the next 3.5 years.
Okay, Commissioner Wright.
I don't know, at this point, that meeting's going to be so important. I would hope that all of our township supervisors, any trustees, our city managers, village managers, mayors, whatever, that they put it on their calendar to be watching us on Zoom. I mean, we need them to also be informed, because they're even the next local level down, so that they can explain to their immediate residents. So I don't know if you send them an invitation or ask them to please block it out. I mean, we're on Zoom. They can watch us from Copper Harbor. You know, it's not like.
Yeah. We this week, Chairman and I held a town hall that our office put together. And that's what we did. We had them all come in. We wanted them to know where we were in the budget process. We wanted them to know, you know, we've heard a lot of concerns about police coverage, contracts, the Delta contract, animal control, concerns that those communities had in and of themselves, right, and their residents. But, so we did that. They know where we are in the budget process. They know that the board will be taking action on the 25th. We can, Logan, send a communication out to all of them, telling them where we'll go. They can speak under public comment at the beginning to give you guys an idea of where they are as leadership in their communities. That's a great idea. We can do that. But they are all informed of where we are today and what we're looking for between now and September. I mean, we're trying to do as best we can to get everybody involved.
Okay, thank you.
Audrey?
I've been debating whether to bring this up or not, but Connie opened the door, and I've been pushing my microphone button on and off, okay. But Connie opened the door, okay. I may end up dragging Tim into this situation. Okay, the summer taxes came out, okay, and the property values went up, and so did the property taxes, okay? And people have this misnomer that, okay, my property taxes increased by $300. You guys got $300 more. That isn't how things kind of work, okay? So I think there's got to be like an education situation here where people understand how property taxes work, and income taxes also, because they seem to have misnomers about that also. But that's what we're getting. My paper says it went up $300. You guys got $300.
Right, I mean, that is, we did try to educate, and I'll talk about Delta Township. They try to educate as well, just because they're in that higher, category. They try to educate and tell where your mills are going. So your mills aren't all coming here. So when we get that increase, it's not all coming here. And it's being lost to the DDAs that we have. You're losing the money there. We still got a rollback this year. But the projection that is listed on the top of this form where it says property tax, that is directly from Mr. Vandermark to give us what the projections, and that he was within, I want to say, $60,000 for his projection for our 24 budget, 23-24 budget, which is phenomenal. And that's what we go on. And then we used to use only 1% of an increase. But because of the growth, we have now applied a 5% increase based on Mr. Vandermark agreeing that we could do that. But you can't go up higher than that and show that we're going to have more revenue just to balance the budget. So we've addressed that. I agree with you wholeheartedly. The public doesn't understand. I don't know why you don't understand, but I will say one reason is because a lot of people's homes are still in escrow and they don't pay the taxes. So that tax statement comes in, they don't look at it. They're just like, it doesn't apply to me. We found that with Bank Intercounty Drain. Some of the people say, well, I'm not in that district, or this doesn't affect me. I've never seen water on my property, and we're still hearing about it today. So we can educate, but one, you're going to have people who aren't going to listen to that because people don't like taxes. I mean, we know that. They don't like taxes. Let's reduce taxes. How's it going to impact me? Reducing property tax has an impact on your services because that is the way the state of Michigan is set up. The income tax is for local communities and for the state of Michigan. Totally different on how they spend it. Sales tax is distributed differently through revenue sharing, and the state has tried to stabilize that. You have a lot of money that goes from the state to, every other service that the state provides. I believe that we have laid it out. If people haven't looked it up, that's not on us. We can't go to every home in the county and explain it, and they'd slam the door on us just because it's, And then also, if you're not educating yourself just in terms of where your tax money goes, if you're not looking at it, because obviously when everybody votes, they're voting for a candidate that has, whether it's their beliefs or the direction you want to go with, an increase in tax. We don't want that. I'm not voting for you because you increase taxes. That's the type of thing that the public should know what they're paying. And then if they're choosing to say that tax dollars are not being spent wisely, they need to come to you. And I think a lot of voters here did come to you by telling you they didn't think it was spent wisely. And I think that a lot of them, by saying that expenses needed to be reduced, they spoke loudly there. You've heard it since both millages failed. So I agree with you. It does not help our bottom line, but the public, we can inform them as much as we can. And I'm looking Logan in the eyes because the frustration there is great. I just looked at Prosecutor Lloyd, and I'll just bring this up. People did not know. He spoke yesterday on the Economic Crimes Unit and what that does. People don't understand how things work. So if they're not looking out for it, the merchants do. They understand what the Economic Crimes Unit does. But if the public doesn't understand what that is, then they have to listen to what we're telling them, or they're choosing not to.
Now, Connie, on the report there, you gave an estimate of a 10% increase in expenses. Okay, what's our projected revenue increase?
So for next year, you mean?
Yeah.
Are you talking about in total the revenue increases? Or if you look over to the left-hand side, to do our trend analysis, every one of those has a different trend factor.
But overall, we're looking at a 10% increase in expenses? Is that what that means?
Well, no, the expenses right now, the estimated budget, well, I don't have that up here for what the budget is this year, but the estimate is a reduction in your expenses right now. What you're looking at where it says updated estimated budget, that's a reduction. You're not looking at any increases. The tax revenue did go up, but our revenues in total went down because we're changing the way we've restructured the Delta contract. So,
I'm oversimplifying.
yeah, we want to make things complicated, so we give you the best information. If we just randomly selected a full amount, like a 10% increase in expenses, you wouldn't get something that is more accurate. Just like I tell you, we don't budget assuming every employee has full family health insurance coverage. And we don't budget so that we assume everybody will be at the top of their salary scale. All of those things are done with where we are today. The only ones that are budgeted that way are open positions. So if we look at an open position, we want to make sure that a department and office has enough money to cover the open position for that year to continue. But if we budgeted where we said this is where we are today, and we're going to assume that everybody's going to take family coverage, you'd be looking at a heck of a lot more cuts. So that's why it is complicated, but that's all done internally in our office, and I'd love for everybody to see it because it's like 30 spreadsheets that open. You change one number, it changes everything. So we try to make sure that we're not giving you a picture that things are worse than they are at any time.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Connie concerning our budget? All righty. Thank you, Connie. We are at limited public comment. Do we have anyone who'd like to speak? All right, seeing none, I will move to adjourn. And we are adjourned.